We've just learned, according to Reuters, that Jeffrey Epstein will not be released on bail. He will remain in jail. What do you think what do you know that the judge was considering when thinking about whether or not to release Jeffrey Epstein?
I think that the judge actually had no choice in this situation. This is an exceptional case. You have someone who was shown by the government to be a risk of flight because of his enormous wealth, and the fact that the defense presented a one-page affidavit about his wealth, which the government felt was wholly insufficient, especially when they wound up raiding his house pursuant to a search warrant at the time of this arrest, and found that there was a huge amount of cash in that home, and that there may be untold assets, whether they be in the form of cash, passports, or otherwise.
What would I'm struggling. I mean, my first thought was this guy supposedly is a billionaire. He says he is. It's never been confirmed, but he's got a lot of money. He's got a big, fancy apartment that's worth $77 million. He has his own private island. It's a no-brainer, as somebody who's not a lawyer, that this guy could represent a flight risk. What did his defense argue in his favor for releasing him?
What the defense does argue, and by the way, ignores the fact that he had a Saudi passport with his photo expired from the 1980s, but with a different name, and which, of course, the government brings out. What the defense had tried to argue is say, look, all we're trying to do in the issue of bail is assure that the defendant will appear in court. That is the only thing that we consider. Two factors to that, not a risk of flight and not a danger to public safety. So what the defense did was create a plan of many, many points where they felt that if he could post collateral, his house, his plane, ground his plane so he could not escape with his plane, then have guards that he would hire that would then monitor his house, not let him out for 24 hours a day, except for things allowed by the court, that he was really going to create his own jail that would assure that he would be there. In addition, my favorite thing that they asked for was that if, in fact, he managed to get to another country, that he would waive extradition, or would waive objection to extradition, excuse me, and he'd come back, which, of course, is a totally unenforceable promise.
Right. So, so that news that he is to remain in jail pending trial. Let's remind again our viewers that Mr. Epstein is involved in a huge sex trafficking case, allegedly abusing dozens of young girls, some of which are alleged to have been at least 14 years old. And we still don't know. I think what's really fascinating about this case is we don't know what the implications are for a number of people, not just Mr. Epstein, but people within his circle.
Yes, of course. And one of the things we know is that he traveled in the world of the rich and powerful, from the factor of power brokers on Wall Street, real estate barons. President Trump at some point was a friend of his. Bill Clinton was a friend of his. Prince Andrew was a friend of his. And what we do know is that there was a treasure trove in that safe in the mansion in the East 70s of New York City that they found in a safe that had not dozens but thousands of photographs of young girls, meaning at the age of 14, probably up to the age of 18, but we really don't know the upper limit, but as young as 14, semi-nude or nude, and that there were these mysterious discs that are labeled, as we know, blank, nudes plus blank. So that leads us to have a great deal of suspicions that perhaps with all of the cameras that may have been in Jeffrey Epstein's home, and we're only talking about New York. We haven't even touched Palm Beach, the island, Santa Fe. We have lots of places he had homes where you could have photographs not only of the young women, but the young women not only with Jeffrey Epstein, but perhaps with other people. In addition, at the press conference at the time of the arrest, both the U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman and the head of the FBI came forth and basically said, please, if you have been a victim of Jeffrey Epstein at any time, would you come forward? We will protect you. We will take care of you. We want to know. So we have the same thing happening now in New Mexico, that they are looking into the possibility of other victims. And we are certainly led to believe by David Boyce, who represents one or more of the victims from the past or from more recent past, that victims are coming to him in addition to the fact that they've been going to the FBI.
So given that Mr. Epstein traveled in these circles, MSNBC had some exclusive video that they ran earlier this week showing then private citizen Trump at Mar-a-Lago with Jeffrey Epstein. The video is pretty old. It's maybe over 15 years old. But we also know former President Bill Clinton was a friend and had traveled on his plane. The famous lawyer Alan Dershowitz is also known to have frequented Mr. Epstein. Given the severity of the charges against him, what could he possibly offer? I think everybody's intrigued by who else was going to be implicated in this. What could he possibly offer to the government?
Well, people who are in the midst of others who are perhaps more well-known, more celebrity, and just as powerful or more, are always good give-ups for someone who would like to lessen their sentence. Jeffrey Epstein is facing, right now, 45 years in prison, and this may not be over. And so he's 66 years old. That's called a life sentence. The problem Jeffrey Epstein has is this. People who know the Southern District of New York, people who have been assistant U.S. attorneys in the Southern District, say that the Southern District would be very loath, very reluctant to enter into a cooperation agreement with a serial sexual predator. So if he's got something, boy, it better be huge. And the benefit he would get, he's not getting a get-out-of-jail-free card if he gets any benefit. He might get a few years, knocked down, if they would even consider it.
So then is it so? So I guess my question would then be, A, how would the government find others that are implicated in this if he's not willing to divulge them?
Well, you've got perhaps physical evidence, like we talked about. Perhaps there are photographs.
Okay, right.
Perhaps no. Plus, you also have victims who may say that they were with Jeffrey Epstein and they were with Mr. So-and-so. We don't know yet. There has certainly been what is considered a very scurrilous, terrible allegation against Alan Dershowitz, which he has vehemently disputed, and he is looking forward to documents being released, which I do believe are supposed to be released on July 25th, that he says those documents will prove that he never was engaged with a particular woman who says that he participated, and these documents will show that he was somewhere else. So you have Alan Dershowitz, who is also fighting for his own reputation already, and
because he's gone, he's been, I mean, our Mola Lenghi interviewed him. He doesn't really give interviews of this nature. He's on TV a lot, but interviews related to his own personal life. As you said, vehemently denying the allegations because he... Say that again, Ross? Okay, so let's go to the lawyers for the victims who are currently speaking right now, and let's listen.
For the court's carefully considered opinion, this is never an easy thing for any court to do, and yet this was done very carefully and very thoughtfully with a result that we and our clients are deeply appreciative of. We also want to congratulate the team that has operated for the government, and to make the point that there was a time when the United States government sadly failed our clients 10 years ago or so. Those days are now apparently behind us. Our clients are happy with the steadfast attitude of the prosecuting team, obviously respectful and appreciative of the court's decision. Glad that the FBI is as active as it is, and we think that the case now needs to go forward on the merits. Our clients will cooperate in every way possible, and we urge those who may still be wondering, should I come forward? Should I be a part of this process? Yes, you should. You can trust the process. You should come forward and help see that justice is done. Thank you.
What next for your clients then?
What next for your client?
Wait, next for the clients is wait to see what happens in the prosecution.
Can you talk about how I don't know if the word's proud, but the business impact statements definitely played a role in denying bail. What do you say to those two victims?
Well, we know them well. They're clients, and we think that they did a very smart and brave thing. And not easy, but they did something important. Thank you very much.
All right, so there you have a lawyer for one of the victims there in front of cameras right here in New York City reacting to the news that Jeffrey Epstein is to remain in jail pending trial. Our Rikki Klieman is here. We've been talking, Rikki, about this, and essentially there was no way that this judge was ever going to let. I mean, all the things that you listed that the defense said, you know, they were going to do to ensure that Mr. Epstein would appear in court at his next scheduled appearance. It just didn't sound to me as something that the judge could possibly do.
I don't think he could possibly have done it, especially after the government filed its responsive memorandum and just demolished the defense plan of his living in his gilded cage. But also, you dealt with the fact that on Monday of this week, at the hearing where we expected an order to come down of detention or not, that you had two victims who spoke to the court and really said that they were frightened to have him on the street. Mm-hmm. And so when you got that aspect of public safety, I think the judge was in a box. I don't see how he could possibly have allowed him to come out. And so this decision is not any surprise, but I do think that you have victims in this case who have not yet come forward, who now will feel a sense of relief, and maybe they can come forward.